we get started and others will hopefully join us here. Um, I'm Wing Campbell. I serve as director of the Mentor Externship Program along with Judy Rush, as you all know. I see so many familiar names, so this is so wonderful. Thank you so much for attending this morning. We hope that this program will be really interactive. It's a chance for us to explore how, through mentoring lawyers and judges, really foster skill development and ethical identity formation of their mentees, and promote full participation and inclusion in the profession and foster respect. So, this will be a great opportunity for us to learn from you, to hear your experiences and ideas, and for all of us to learn from each other about mentoring and about our program. So, welcome.
Hi, I'm Judy Rush, and I have the pleasure of directing this program with Wing Campbell and with the wonderful assistance of Monica Anderson. Um, so you have bios of Wing and I. I don't know that you have a bio of Monica, but Monica um, is our is the person who really helps us manage this program. And she's here today, both so that we can introduce her and so she can help us manage this and make sure that we don't miss any of your comments that you put in the chat, or we don't miss your hands if you're putting your hands up. But Monica, do you want to just introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. Hi, I'm Monica. Glad to see all of you here. I'm the coordinator for external relations, so I work really closely with the Mentor Externship Program, external relations, Lisa Brabbit, Gloria Myrie in the student life and alumni. So yeah, great to be here and great. I'm happy to help.
Wonderful. Thank you, Monica. And it's so good to see so many of you here. Let's jump in, and will be opportunities as we go along to have some conversation. But in the meantime, if you have questions that you want to raise, please feel free to use the chat function, and we will, because this is for you. Wing and I have presented this program before, but it's new every time because it has the participation of each one of you in it. And so we're really looking forward to hearing what you have to say as well. But let's jump on in. So why mentor? This is an ethics program, so of course we're gonna focus on ethics. But the reason that you all mentor is one reason is just that's what lawyers do, not because we have to, but because we take seriously our obligation to the profession to improve the quality of justice, the quality of service in the profession, learning in the law. And then we probably also have some other reasons because we get something from the mentor program ourselves. What the rules of professional conduct tell us is that we have that special responsibility for the quality of justice, that we should, and you do, seek to improve the law and the quality of service in the profession, and that we should think about the law beyond the law that we're using every day in our work, and use it to really impact the law and work to strengthen legal education as well as the system of justice. So who are we? From the perspective of the rules of professional conduct, we're advisors, we're advocates, we're negotiators, we're evaluators. That fits our mentors, plus so many other roles that our mentors play. What must we do? We have an obligation to be competent, prompt, diligent, maintain communication and confidentiality. Those are the core duties that we have. But then also to attain the highest level of skill, improve the legal profession, and exemplify the profession's ideals of public service. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to read all the slides, but I think these core pieces are just so demonstrative of what it is that mentors are teaching students. So what benefit does this have to the mentees? Well, it enhances their classroom experience. They there's lots that they can't learn in the classroom. And from you as mentors, you help them learn the law, not learn the book law necessarily, but to learn what it looks like. So when they're reading civil procedure in their classes and then have an opportunity to see it with you, or they're learning about in their BA class about corporate formation, and then they get a chance to actually see it. That's how they're learning the law. You teach them how to be professionals. What are the standards of the profession? They're high, and most of our students, when they first come to us, they don't have an appreciation of that. And so, learning what it means to be a lawyer, learning about their professional identity. That is who they themselves will be as a lawyer, but who they will be in connection with others. What it means to be a member of this profession. And it gives them a chance through the logs that they keep to get into the habit of reflection and to realize that they're not here in law school just to, they don't come in so that we can fill them up with a little package of rules and statutes and basic principles to take with them, that actually this is but a small piece of who they will be as lawyers. And the work that you do is so instrumental in that. And we hope it also gives you a chance to engage in that kind of reflection that maybe you don't always have time for in the middle of your normal day. But hopefully through the mentoring relationship, you're able to give some of those things some thought and realize, why it is that you became a lawyer in the first place. So this is the audience participation part. So why do you mentor? You can just unmute yourself and jump in. It looks like we're not having the problem of everyone speaking at once.
I see a lot of alums on here. So it's so wonderful to see familiar names. But yeah, please let us know why you mentor. What do you get out of it?
Don't make us call on you.
Well, I know, yeah, I get quite a lot out of it by being reminded of what it was like to be a student. It gives me puts me back in that mindset and reminds me that, I guess, a little bit of humility and just kind of how grateful I am that I've made it where I have. And then it's good to feel, what comes from the students as well. But as far as what I get out of it, I really think it's helpful to kind of get put back in that place.
Excellent, excellent.
I think building on what Ryan just said, this is Karen Boyson, building on what Ryan just said, I think it just to be able to give back and to know that you're hopefully helping a student. It's hard to be a law student and it's scary. And just to have, be someone who can be a listening ear and someone who's not, one of their, professors or someone else, but someone who is almost like not disinterested, but just not someone who they're worried about being able to share things and ask questions and, ask those hard things. I just like being able to help in that way because I remember what that was like, and just to be a resource.
Yeah, although students have some trepidation many times early on when they meet you, because you might not feel yourselves that you're intimidating, but to a law student, you can be very intimidating. But ultimately, I think students end up getting self-confidence and feel support from you, in addition to learning so much from you.
Judy and Wing, we also have many great comments on the chat.
Ah.
Yeah.
Excellent. I'm not quite sure why. Oh, there's a chat. Oh my gosh, absolutely. So I'm not going to necessarily read through all of these, but I assume all of you can kind of buzz through the chat. But um, um, mentoring because somebody mentored them. So one of our alums is saying that. Good and bad mentoring, I love that, because you don't just learn from seeing people at their best. Sometimes you learn how not to do things. I love that. David Best, learning knowledge, expanding his own knowledge base. Suzanne Remington, welcome as a mentor. Hopefully this gives you an idea of really the value of it. And connection, the connection with a mentor, especially during COVID. We definitely have a slide on that. Can't emphasize that enough, but I think that connection is so critical. I mean, this relates back to them being part of a greater profession, learning how to relate to others and seeing the value of having colleagues. And it's a little harder. It's definitely a little harder in COVID to do that. So wow. Anyone else want to jump in?
Yeah, Julia pointed out that she remembers how lonely it was as a law student. So if you can imagine adding COVID to that, we are hearing from students that it is really, really, really lonely doing classes online and not seeing another human being in person. So, I mean, I think those are all just terrific insights.
Great. Did anyone else want to jump in? Otherwise, we'll move on. All right. Oopsie. All right. So in everything that you're doing, you're modeling competence. That, not just that rule 1.1 competence, but what it is, the knowledge, the preparation, and the skills that you bring to the work that you do. And then teaching professionalism. So there is so much to being a lawyer that comes from the customs, the mores, the habits of lawyers, what it means to be in relationship with others in the profession. And this couldn't be truer at this point in time that we have such a different, for many of our mentors, the traditions that we had are very different than the traditions now with social media and other things. I mean, just as one example, it's kind of a big deal, and it looks like it's still kind of a medium deal to publish news about yourself in the bench and bar, to say that you've moved firms or done other things. There's been a movement kind of away from that because there's all these social media outlets, and so so the mores and the customs and the habits change, but by having mentors and students together, talking about it and experiencing it, I think we learn so much from each other. We structure the program for the last few years. We've really been trying to be creative about helping students realize the skills that they get out of this program. And so we were fortunate that in 2016, a landmark study was done of 24,000 lawyers in 50 states from all practice backgrounds to determine what are the foundational skills that law students need in order to be able to launch successful careers. And let's see. And these 10 skills, I mean, if you take a look at them, obviously they're not all the skills that we need, but these were the top 10 skills that students should have. And the beauty of these is that they can be developed, they can be demonstrated, they can be discussed in the mentor relationships. And so helping students just realize how they're moving forward in their development and towards really being able to not just have the book smarts, but to be able to have those skills, sort of hard skills as well as soft skills that they need that they need. And so, just something like, being on time, for example, what does on time mean in the profession? I mean, they wouldn't know. I mean, they could take a look at this and say, okay, I need to make sure I'm on time, which means not being late, right? Which might have its own definition. But what does it mean to be on time for a deposition? Well, you don't show up at the last second for a deposition, right? I mean, helping students understand what the standards are. You don't show up, well, maybe you show up for a hearing right at the last second. You definitely show up for a CLE at the last second. That's okay. But I mean, that's just one example of how you can just make these skills understandable. You model them, you talk about them, and you get a chance to see them in the students. What it takes to be competent. This one, both, there's a minimum level of competence in the profession, but what does it mean to be competent in the work that you do? Whether you practice law in a more traditional sense, or you are working in a different environment, what do you need to bring to the game every day to be able to be a great lawyer? And I know, many mentors think of initially think of this program as, okay, I have an opportunity to show the students this cool stuff that I'm doing. So I'm gonna just kind of let them in on mostly on the cool stuff, right? Not on the hard stuff, right? Not on the here's what you need to have, and here's what it looks like when you don't have that. Here's an example of when I, wasn't quite there. Didn't quite have what I needed that day to be able to deliver what I need to deliver as a lawyer. Diligence. I mean, our program is all about diligence. We have deadlines throughout the year. We are trying to help students understand, they should see the deadlines coming up on the horizon and work towards them. But diligence may look very different if you're a public defender versus a family lawyer versus somebody who's working in the M&A area. What does diligence mean? What is it that you need to do to deliver the services to those that you serve? An important part of competence is lawyer well-being. And I know traditionally lawyers haven't thought in these terms, and even our disciplinary folks haven't necessarily thought about it in those terms. But I think we're getting closer to all being on the same page, that to be a good lawyer, you need to be a healthy lawyer. The results. Most of you have probably heard about the Path to Lawyer Wellbeing, which is an ABA initiative that grew out of a couple studies that shows that overall we are not doing very well as lawyers in being well. And it's just, for a profession that's dependent on client service and the public trust, we absolutely have to consider wellness as part of our competence. And how do we, how can we be role models around this? Well, we're all it's all a process, right? But maybe sometimes de-emphasizing alcohol as a relaxation tool. Just being a good role model, and to share with students when you feel comfortable doing that. Be vulnerable with them about this. I think our students are very in tune with well-being. I think the classes in the last few years have been willing to talk about challenges and not feel like they always need to be protecting their soft underbelly. The ABA views this as a crisis of competency. The studies showing the chronic stress, the rates of depression, just show that we can't sustain that, and we can't be competent. That's the nice quote from the report. The sad reality that came from this Hazelton study in 2016, you can see it here. High levels of substance abuse, depression, severe anxiety, elevated stress, suicidal thoughts. These are all in such, the standard in the general population is about 8% for substance use and depression. And so we're looking at at rates that are clearly elevated. These weren't surprises to most people, but the biggest surprise was that over a third of lawyers under 30 met the criteria for substance use. And it was originally thought that it was the folks who were in practice for a long time that were at the biggest risk as time went on. But the reality is that that we're suffering, and the youngest segment of our colleagues are suffering. Law students are doing even worse overall than lawyers. In the study that was done in 2014, which is actually being relaunched now, so we'll have new numbers again in about a year. This is done by Professor Organ here, as well as folks on the national level. But the statistics of what's going on with students are pretty compelling. I mean, the level of anxiety, 37%. And that, I mean, I think that that's going to include some folks who are actually diagnosed with anxiety, but it's going to include a lot of folks who are just incredibly anxious. And so there's no doubt that you're going to see students who are anxious, who really are dealing with some difficult things. And these are the stats that come from 2014. Here we are in the midst of a pandemic, and we have, unfortunately, not very many studies are done of lawyers and law students. I mean, we have some recent ones, but I think the previous ones were probably 20 years old, right? The good news is that we have folks on a national level who are looking at us as a whole population. And what we know is that that young people, the prevalence of anxiety disorder increased exponentially. Let's see, sorry, I'm covering up my own slides here. Compared to, pre-COVID, there were approximately 3 times post-COVID anxiety and depressive disorder, and about twice as many respondents reported serious consideration of suicide than they did pre-pandemic. I mean, that is telling. And you all know that you're probably not, if you look back to the, if you look back a year ago and see how you were feeling and how things were going, I can guarantee that there's very few people who say, wow, this pandemic has really been a boost, because it hasn't. It's been difficult. I know from communicating with you last year, early on, you have everyone just trying to, trying to take it all in, and now we're trying to, live with it on a daily basis, realizing that it's not going away. So, so our students and you, all the more so, need to be able to take care of yourselves. And so, if you think about how are you managing this, what methods you have found to help manage this, to share those with others, especially your student, because we're all suffering, and it's not just the pandemic, because we also have, social unrest, which many of our students ended up having to move out of their homes and those sorts of things. Many of our students lived right in the midst of the disturbances following the murder of George Floyd. Divisive politics. It's tough. So well-being really can't be more important than it is right now. All right. Ethical standards of the profession. Confidentiality is the key to the to our program. Our students all read Rule 1.6. They're required to check off that they've read it, that they will maintain confidentiality. It's a wonderful conversation to have with students about what confidentiality means in what you do, how you maintain it, what happens when you don't, what your policies are in your firm or in your organization about confidentiality. Those are all great topics of conversations, or they can even be experiences if you have students review the policies that you have within your worlds. Conflicts of interest. We we had an incredible number of students who contacted us this year about potential conflicts, which isn't bad news. I love the fact that our students really are appreciating conflicts of interest in the mentor relationship, realizing that maybe when they're at the public defender's office, they can't have a judge as a mentor in the same county and things like that. But again, this is such an important concern for lawyers in the practice of law, and is just a great way to teach students the ethical standards of the profession. Communication. What communication makes sense? The forms of communication. You know, these are an opportunity to tell some really good stories. The zealous advocacy. What does it mean to be a zealous advocate? And what does it mean to maybe cross the line? And where do you draw that line? These are great ways to teach our students about ethical standards. Also, if you think about the work that you're doing, you're involved. And again, this isn't the sexy stuff. This isn't, the mentor appearing before the U.S. Supreme Court, which would be so awesome to watch, but doesn't happen every day. Instead, you're involved in a whole range of different things: state and federal court systems, alternative dispute resolution. You're negotiating things. You're running law firms. You're engaging in pro bono service. Some of you are managing law firms and managing employees. And so if you think about just how a law student would have no idea of these things, especially, we have law students who, especially first generation law students, who don't come in having lawyers in their families. They may not have even ever met a lawyer. Many of them have not worked in a legal setting. It's all the more important for those students. But I would say most of our students really don't know unless they're working in a firm or have somebody showing them really what the business of law is, or how the court systems actually work. And now, of course, in COVID, the discussions about how the court systems work changed by the day, because everything is in transition. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the things that you like to do in order to teach the students what it means to be a lawyer. Come on, I know. Some of you have an approach. I know some of you are newer mentors. But for those of you who've mentored for a long time, what is it that you strive to do with each mentor relationship? Take a look at the chat. Observations for observing things, unpacking what was observed. That's the core suggestion we have for mentors, is to bring your student along, whatever that means in COVID. Typically now it means that the two of you are in your respective locations observing something together or having a Zoom call. But having an opportunity to see lawyers and judges in action, that's the experience piece. And then afterwards to talk about it, to allow the student to ask questions, to get a sense of what the student takeaways were. One of the very best ways that I used to do that was, and again, this involves riding in a car with a student, which isn't something we can do at the moment, but getting the student the documents for a hearing in advance so that they could take a look at the documents in advance. If we rode together, we would use that to talk about what the students' impressions were from reading the affidavits. I would bring students to family law cases just because there's always good stuff there. What do they take away from the affidavits? What do they think the judge is going to be concerned about? And then going in and seeing with the judge how it proceeds, and having a chance afterwards to do it. And so all those things can be done. They can be done virtually, but that whole series of events is like the perfect opportunity.
David Best also offered that he likes to put law school in perspective, tips and tricks, jokes, etc. And I also want to add, I remember reading a log from a student who sat down with you, David, and you walked them through how to do research on a case. And it was on a real case you were working on. And it was so impactful for the student to see that process of, looking at the case notes, your investigation notes, and then, how to start the research, and then walking through the steps of the research with you. Now with COVID, that's stuff that you can do virtually or do remotely with each other via Zoom, or even doing it by phone. But I just want to point out some of the experiences that you've offered, David, that have just been amazing for the students.
So I see George Warner out there, and he is not muted. Are you going to share with us, George? Maybe he's having technical difficulties. I know, so George Warner does a lot of transactional work, and sometimes lawyers aren't quite sure what to do for law students, and law students don't know what to ask for. That's the other piece. But transactional lawyers have so much to offer, especially during COVID, because essentially sharing a document with a student, sending it to them via email, having them review it, give you some comments, maybe responding to them via email, that's an experience. You can add even more richness to that by setting up a Zoom call afterwards to kind of go through it. Or you could even use a Zoom call to take them through a purchase agreement, for example. That's one of my, maybe they're not as exciting these days. Maybe they're so much more standardized than they were before. But every contract, even if there's some standards, there's some things that are negotiable. There are some things that have meanings that you wouldn't know from the document itself. Anyone else want to jump in about their approach, what they like to do with students? Otherwise, I'm going to keep talking. We have a mentor who works in the public sector who likes to have, if it works out, likes to have the same student for all 3 years, which is great. And he usually has a plan for what he'll take them through each year, based on them being a 1L student and being new to things, moving into, so the students have what you think, they have torts and they have contracts and they have civil procedure. They have a basic, I think they have a basic crim law class. And then in second year, they're taking some other things and they're ready for some, maybe they'll write a memorandum. Not necessarily the one you're going to submit to court, but you can have them research and write a memorandum, and do some other things. You can have them, do some prep as if they were preparing a deposition, and that sort of thing. And so whether you have a plan like that where you have certain stages you like, or whether you just have a sense of you really just want to be there to be whatever the student needs you to be, it's all good and it's all appreciated, and it's all going to teach these students about the work that you do and what it means to be a lawyer.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I do like to say that I like to laugh with them. I like to hear their stories. I like to know how they're doing. And so that's what I love about the students and mentoring them and saying that things will be okay. And tomorrow is a new day. So that's what I like to do with the students.
Wonderful. Thank you, Monica. I think that part was my favorite of being a mentor, be able to really get to know the students. I definitely had some students who came in and said, well, I'm not quite sure why I got a family lawyer, or I want to go into business. And maybe we didn't connect quite as much on the subject matter, but I always tried to, connect on other things. And I actually had a mentee. We went to exercise classes together, which she could log. I mean, she couldn't log all of her experiences as wild card, go to a step class. But we did some things together that were just ways of relaxing and having an opportunity to have a meal or whatever. So I think that personal connection is so critical, both to well-being and just to relationship formation. So thanks, Monica. All right. Any last? All
If I
right.
can chime in, Judy.
Yay.
Yeah, something I'm still struggling to process, which then means it's good for the students to process, is your role between the difference between being a zealous advocate and you're not the finder of fact when you're representing your client. And so what do you do when you see the equitable outcome differently? I tend to skew towards, my own opinion of equity and in family law and telling them, look, I can take that position, but that's going to lead us towards trial. And you've told me you don't want to do that. And, but sometimes I'm wrong and I'm not the client. And so just, it's still difficult for me. It was difficult in law school, drawing that distinction between the client's autonomy, my role, the judge's role, the opposing counsel's role, and both on paper and between your two ears, it's pretty challenging. I think it's something good for students to process as well.
Absolutely. That is so rich, David. That's exactly what they can't get out of a book. And getting a sense of how you process and hearing how they process is just, such a great learning experience for both of you. All right. Well, there'll be more time at the end for chatting if we keep this show on the road. All right. All right. So one of the things that we want to focus on a little bit is the role of a mentor in giving feedback. Many times I think mentors want to be a buddy or a pal. They don't necessarily want to be harsh with the students, and they shouldn't be harsh. I mean, students can be somewhat fragile, but as a mentor, one of the things that you want to think about is how hearing from you and how you are perceiving something is so helpful for the students to be able to kind of help them understand how maybe one of their behaviors looked to you or might be perceived by others. We're here to help support mentors, of course, throughout the mentor relationship. And mentors will call and say, it seems like the student is just not preparing. It looks like he scribbled something in the car before he came in. It was on a napkin. I don't think it was the PPDP, but I didn't really want to say anything. But I want to let you know. And that's fine. I mean, you're not expected to be an expert in our documents or what all the requirements are. In a way, the student is meant to be driving it. We hope to give you the information you need to understand kind of deadlines and what they're working on and and what the expectations are. But I think to take an opportunity when it's a fresh opportunity to talk to a student about, hey, I'm not getting a sense from what we're working with here that, do you have your mission statement? Or, I think in the past I've seen a mission statement. Let's talk about that a little bit and finding ways to help the student. I mean, not to shame them or to blame them for not coming up with perhaps what they should have, but to work with what they have and kind of find out where the student is at. Because most of our students want to do well. They want to be their best and perform, but they can't always. I mean, they're learning how to manage their time. And especially our 2L students in particular seem to take on so much as 2Ls. And then they have a difficult time managing it. The good news is that they'll emerge from this cocoon with time and time management skills, but they're not going to happen automatically. And helping students kind of understand how to manage, finding out where they're at, just being honest with them about what the expectations of the profession are. Is critical. And we're happy, we sit down with students, we give them advice. We give them advice how to talk to you sometimes, because they're just not quite sure how to ask for something, or how to, they screwed up, they haven't called or emailed you for a long time, and now they're going to have to ask you to do something. We help them manage that. And we're mentoring all the time, which is one of the beauties of the work that Wing and I and Monica get to do. But hearing some things from you is helpful. It can really be helpful. There have been times where we've heard through a grapevine, for example, that a student showed up for something that was going to be a board meeting, and they showed up in sweatpants and couldn't do what was planned. And I think the mentor the mentor didn't feel comfortable commenting on it. Students need to know. They don't necessarily know. Although I think the student who showed up in federal court in shorts should have known. But mentors are here to help students understand what the standards of the profession are. And so we encourage giving feedback. There's a handout in the materials, which is actually just a piece of our mentor externship manual. And at the risk of, I'm going to try to share that with you. Let me. Okay. I think I can do this. This gives everybody a moment to pause. Can you see the feedback? The feedback document? Wing, help me out here. Is it there?
No, it is
I'm not seeing it.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, I'll do a quick summary of it. Timely, taking advantage of the opportunities to give the feedback, just being honest, positive and negative feedback, encourage the students, be focused, do it in private, have it be a little balanced. Strengths and weaknesses are both helpful. Non-judgmental, and then constructive. Giving them constructive feedback is essentially the way that they can learn. So let me get back to Zoom.
Judy, may I ask a question? This is Terry Crunk.
Bless you. Yes,
Thank you.
Terry.
While you were on the topic of attire, is it, this is the first time I'm mentoring, and when I was going to be meeting with my mentee and we were going to court together, I guided him on the appropriate attire. Is that, I'm asking for forgiveness instead of permission at this point, but is that appropriate just to say, he didn't need to wear a suit for this, but he didn't need to wear shorts either. Right. So could you give me a little feedback on that?
Oh, absolutely. I think students don't necessarily know unless you tell them what the expectations are. And so I think it's perfectly appropriate, and they appreciate hearing from you on that. I think, the more difficult conversations are sometimes around sort of their choice of, how they, given what you suggested, the choices that they made, and figuring out how best to, address that with them. Um, David Best says, so when the judge appears on Zoom in a contested Zoom hearing with no tie, oh, I missed the rest of it. Sometimes you get bad examples from others. Is that what that is, David? But yeah, I think that's perfectly appropriate. And I know that was raised in last year during the conference, and there was folks had different opinions about that. I mean, what's the risk of not telling a student what the appropriate attire is? That they might not be able to see it, that you might be embarrassed if you allow them to.
Right. And I mean, if it were me, I would rather somebody tell me or give me guidelines rather than showing up and, looking like a fool, basically. And my mentee is a 1L. And so with very little court experience, and I don't ever want to put him in a position that he feels uncomfortable or, certainly underdressed. You're never really going to be overdressed for court per se, but I didn't want him to end up in that uncomfortable position. So that's kind of the way I plan to guide him in, events that we take on.
Absolutely.
This is Juliana. I'd like to add on to that also takes, I like the idea of that. It also takes into account the students that we talked about earlier that are first-gen grad students, first-gen college students, with families who either, they may be the first person going to any sort of professional or like postgraduate institution. The first, like for me, for example, I was the first person who went to college in the United States, first person who went to law school in my family. So had someone not told me, you don't have to wear a suit, but don't show up in sweats, I'd like to think that I would have shown up kind of like in a, professional attire. But I think we need to keep into account that there are students in the population that don't know and would really appreciate having someone with the experience. Maybe I wouldn't say like, you told me you were a first gen student, so you clearly don't know this, but I think it's considerate to a certain extent to share the knowledge that you have, in case someone doesn't have that knowledge. The last thing you want to do, sorry, I don't remember the name of the person who spoke before me, was to have someone show up and feel embarrassed because they weren't told. Not necessarily like don't wear your Birks to court or to this meeting, but no ripped jeans at the very minimum, because it's something I've struggled with throughout law school, and I consider myself pretty privileged in the fact that I grew up in white suburbia, so a lot of these things are passed on to me by just virtue of the people that I spend time with. And some people don't have that kind of experience or privilege, and so I think sharing that is really important, especially because we've all seen the numbers of BIPOC people making it through law school, making it to partner status, making it to kind of shareholder status. So I think it's just something we need to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that is so important. And we might not know our students' background. I mean, one of the things I think that Wing will talk about is, we encourage relationship building so that it feels like a safe space to share. But you wouldn't always know what a student's background is. And I think, here in this program, we've said things like, okay, business casual. Well, all right, you need some background to know what business casual is, right? And if you say something like Dockers or just not jeans, but a nice pair of pants and a nice shirt, would be good. Wayne Campbell is really good about being specific on that, because I think she does trial ad and is always telling students how to how they should dress. But I think to be descriptive instead of relying on just sort of some standard terms that are thrown around in your law firm. One of the things that we tell students is they should assume formality until the mentor says, "Oh, don't worry about wearing that suit. We dress down in this firm. You don't need to do that unless we have something going on." And generally to kind of follow the mentor's lead. Not that you need to go out and buy the nice suits that your mentor is wearing, but if they're wearing a suit is good. So, but I think they learn so much more directly from you and from being put in situations where they have kind of a chance to see the variety of things. Because there have been Berkeys in court. I've seen Berkeys in court. And that wasn't a mentee. That'd be a mentor. So great. Any other points about feedback? Things you wish you could have commented on, or things you did comment on to a student, just to share examples? All right. It's tough. It's a tough area, and and we're here to support you in having conversations with students if you want to have them, or to let us know what's going on. So not to out the student or get them in trouble, because we really we're relationship folks, and so we're trying to maintain good relationships. If a student comes in and says this mentor is horrible, well, we know the mentor's not horrible. We don't have horrible mentors, but tell us about what difficulty that you're having. They don't usually say horrible. They just say, I can't don't hear back from my mentor. I can't get in touch with them. I don't think they like me, is something that students will say sometimes. And so helping students understand, and teaching them about how to communicate with people, how to ask for things, is something that we do on the student side as well as the mentor side. So please take advantage of that. All right. I have a feeling that you can't see the slides, but the good news is that the last slide just says discussion, and then Wing is going to be jumping in. So it looks like we have a few more minutes just to allow you all to share. Have you ever had an experience where mentoring wasn't as fun or challenging? Or it was so a bad mentor-mentee experience? I'm looking in the chat. How about,
I'll pipe in.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah. I don't know that I would qualify it as necessarily a bad experience, but I've I've been a mentor now for 12 years, I think. That dates me a bit.
Thank you.
But I definitely have had mentees that I'm not as, I don't jive with as well. And whether that's a function of my personality or theirs, who knows? But I definitely have had those mentors or mentees where it's kind of pulling teeth to get things accomplished, to, set up times to meet, when we're meeting, pulling out information or pulling out the discussion, and sometimes that's just a function of somebody being shy or, uncomfortable. It hasn't happened. I think it's happened only really one time. And then I think it is our responsibility to try and adapt to their needs, because we're here for them. That's kind of, that's part of the challenge in being a mentor, I think, generally speaking. And, making sure that they feel able to have a discussion with you is part of what we're supposed to do here. So I don't know that I would qualify it as bad, but certainly just maybe some personality differences have occurred.
Right. And that can be challenging. And sometimes you don't know what it is. Are they just not effectively managing their time, or they're just not into it? Are they, do they have something else going on? Sometimes helping students, you know, if it seems like they're just always up against the deadline and just coming and asking for things when they know they need to see you, you know, that might not be trying to avoid you. That just might be that they just don't have a system, a good system to use to manage their time. And so some, you know, I've heard some mentors will set up regular meetings with the students. You know, it's like the third week of the month. They'll try to hold open some time that they can use for experience time, even if they don't have something, a particular experience in mind. They'll have a conversation instead, and that allows for a check-in. But it, you know, I think, you know, not everybody is meant to be longtime mentors and mentees, although all of us have had some experience where it has turned into a longer term relationship because we did connect. And so it's opportunity and encouragement to do that. I saw a comment, somebody jumped in about students who don't show up. Wow, and that's a difficult one because you know, to have a student come to a deposition or to an experience, or even just to come when they're supposed to be talking to you, and they don't show up, and they don't email, and they don't communicate with you what's going on, that's frustrating. You are volunteers. We so appreciate your time. We try to instill in students the fact that you are volunteers and that they need to be very respectful. But I think there's times, again, when that's a perfect opportunity, I think, for feedback or intervention with the student. I mean, we can usually see, you know, if a mentor calls us and says the student is not showing up for things, I would say, thank you for letting us know. I'd look into mentor log and I'd say, yeah, I see that there's, you know, some deadlines missed, and I don't see a whole lot of communication. And so that allows me not to contact the student and say, hey, your mentor says you're not showing. I can bring them in and find out what's going on. I mean, we have resources here. Sometimes students have some pretty difficult things going on in their life. Sometimes they're not managing their time well. Sometimes they're overwhelmed and they're not even quite sure what to do. And so, so I think, you know, letting us know that it's happening. And if you want, you know, if you want us to talk with you about how you might approach it, we're happy to do that. Or if you just want to let us know so that we can check in and see how that student is doing, it could make a real difference and hopefully improve the experience for you. I'm just looking to see if there's something in the chat. Anyone else want to share challenges, or, you know, share an example of when things just clicked really well and why you think that was?
Well, I can share an example when I was in the office all by myself and a student really came in super upset. He started yelling at me and I just let him yell for 5 minutes or so. And finally, you know, when he was done speaking, I was like, do you feel better now? And he's like, I kind of do. I'm like, all right. So let's now unpack this. Let's see where we can, you know, let's meet you where you're at. So, I mean, I love that where people say we have to meet them where they're at. Let's communicate. Let's understand what's going on. Because, yeah, sometimes students will come in super defensive, but they actually don't know how to behave or what to do in that situation because they feel like they're the ones that are being put to the test because there's so much going on. So let's just unpack that with them for a little bit and see where they are at. And I think after that, he never came into the office angry or upset. He was just like always happy, always saying hi to me. And it was just, was kind of an incredible moment, but I could have easily like shut him down. I could have easily said, wait a minute, don't yell at me. I don't know what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. That's not how you approach things. Yeah, I was in my total right to do that, but I just felt at that moment that he really needed to get something out. So I just let him do it.
Thanks, Monica, for sharing. So sometimes I just had one example that I thought of. We had sometimes the students will do something that's it's not in their best interest. So so maybe they have a mentor. Sometimes when students get to the 3L level, and especially those students who have a job already, they might think they've just got everything all kind of nailed down. And they really don't need you for anything, because really they've kind of got it. And helping, the positive way to say that is they don't realize that this is a continuing learning process throughout their careers, and that every opportunity that you have to learn from another human being, whether they're your mentor, a judge, an opposing counsel, a client, those are all opportunities for growth. But if you have a student who just seems to say, well, I think I know all this. I guess I don't, I'm not much interested in doing experiences with you, but maybe we could talk every once in a while. That's tough. I mean, then the mentor is feeling rejected, right? Like, oh, he doesn't like what I do. He's not interested. He doesn't think I have anything to add. But the reality is that it's an opportunity to to educate the student a little bit about how, well, one, that it's a growth, he's losing out on a growth opportunity, but also how that sounds, because sometimes they don't know how they, how they come across, especially if you have somebody that you figure you're not clicking with. It might be a communication thing, and the student might not even realize that they're sending the messages.
One of the things, this is Kelly, one of the things that I always incorporate into my mentorship is the idea that the legal community in the Twin Cities is incredibly small. And that means that every interaction you have with another lawyer, another judge, anybody in this community, that is, one building block of your reputation. You have no idea who you're going to run into in the future. And professional courtesy is a big in what we do. I mean, I have people all the time that I work with on the other side where, I'm requesting something that maybe, they don't have to do for me, but because, we have a good professional relationship, they extend the courtesy and vice versa. And I think, it's a short-sighted way of looking at this experience to think, I've got my job, I'm good to go. But I think it is our responsibility to let them know, every interaction you have with somebody is important. And it doesn't matter who they are to you or what they can give you in that moment. You should be treating them as though they're going to give you something later. It's just, I think that's an important part of what we do.
Absolutely. We have a research assistant, and then I'll end so that Wing can get into her program. But we have a research assistant who we paired her with a mentor. She wanted to do compliance. We paired her with a mentor who we thought did compliance, but really didn't. He was a litigator. Maybe he did compliance in his background, or his law firm put compliance up on his bio. But she said, I'm super interested in compliance, but at the same time, I'd love to hear why you love your job. I'd love to learn about what it is you do, even though I'm probably not going to do it. That's the attitude that we are trying to model for students, because that's really what we want them just to recognize, that, even if you're going to be in the compliance area, it's good to know, just like in law school, you learn an awful lot of things you might not actually use. It's good to have that knowledge, and it's good to have that relationship, and to be respectful to the mentor and care about what drives the mentor to love the work that he does. So helping students understand why you do what you do and why you love what you do, and really how universal the work that you do is to what they will do in the future. What other lawyers do is just is one way to kind of bridge skepticism or a lack of connection. All right, Wing.
Thank you, Judy. So before we switch gears to talk about eliminating bias in the profession, I wanted to look at how diverse or not diverse our profession is. So I thought I'd share some statistics to see how our legal profession is doing with diversity. Um, First, it helps to kind of see how diverse the US population is. So about 60% of the population is white, about 50% of the population is female, 18.5% of the population is Hispanic or Latino, a little over 13% of the population is Black or African American. Now, this was based on the census population estimates from the US Census Bureau last year. We don't have any updated numbers for 2020 yet. Um, but let's compare that to our profession itself, the legal profession itself. So, according to the most recent numbers from the ABA and NALP, the National Association for Law Placement, 31% of law students are minority, 54% of law students are women. Now, if we look at our at lawyers, 85% of lawyers are white, 64% of lawyers are male, or 36% are female. 5% of lawyers are Hispanic or Latino. 5% of lawyers are African American. 0.53% of lawyers have disabilities. Almost 3% of lawyers are openly LGBT. What are your reactions to those numbers? Or if anybody has any guesses as to whether we as a profession are becoming more diverse, or are we kind of staying the same? Any thoughts about reactions about those numbers?
I'll just keep talking.
Please, we love it.
Um, I would say, I mean, I sit on the alumni board as for this law school as well. And I've seen, you know, the intense efforts from the law school to engage in diversifying our student population and, you know, how challenging that can be, especially being the law school that we are in the city that we are in. We face a unique set of circumstances that some other schools don't face. So I think in terms of where we're headed, the school is very much aware of wanting to diversify, wanting to make that a priority, you know, making efforts toward that. So my thought on it is maybe a little optimistic, but I think ultimately it will be changing in a positive direction toward more diversity. But I think it's kind of one of those things, like it's turning the cruise liner, right? Like it's baby steps and it's long-term effort. The long game is important, and we're not going to see the rewards tomorrow, but hopefully in the next 5, 10, 15 years, those things will be seen more clearly.
I love that optimism, and you're exactly right. It's like Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, right? Real lasting change is incremental. And I'm sorry, did I interrupt you, Karen?
Well, I was just going to say, I agree with both what you just said, Lynn, and what Kelly said too. I do, I have to admit, after practicing for over 20 years, I've become a little bit perhaps jaded, because when I went to Hamlin, my law school class, I believe, was the first law school class that had over 50% women. And the percentages of women lawyers, particularly partners in law firms, has not changed in that time. And what also is really unfortunate is when the recession happened, you know, in the 2008 timeframe, the strides that have been made in terms of diversifying our profession went drastically the other way. And sadly, in the 12 years since then, we still haven't made up those numbers. And so I do remain optimistic. I do agree with the comments that you both just said, but I also have to admit that I'm dismayed by what I've seen over my 20 plus years of practice.
I think Karen, what Karen just said is she's previewing one of my slides that's coming up, looking at how diversity has changed or has improved in our legal profession. she like I said, she's kind of previewing how it hasn't changed that much. But like Karen said, and like Kelly said, I'm really optimistic too. You know, just our law school, like Kelly pointed out, we are really focused on trying to increase diversity in our profession by making sure we have a diverse body of law students. I serve on the subcommittee on collaborating with community projects to, on diversity and inclusion. And we are going to look at trying to reach out, and not just, in the law school itself, but in the community, and maybe looking at filling our pipeline with kids, reaching out to kids in high school and elementary school, and really starting at that point to increase diversity in our law school, which will then increase diversity in our profession. So it's not changing as quickly as we would like, but we remain optimistic.
This is Juliana. Can I just jump in on this quick too? Um, the intentional work of of the law school is really important. Um, as a first step, and I also think that, you know, it is incremental steps towards the right, towards diversifying the classrooms at UST Law and the profession. Um, and I also think I think it is important to add that because the population is diversifying by nature, the classes, you know, best case scenario should be becoming more diverse as well. The intentionality of it, I think, is really important. I know I've brought it up before, but again, BIPOC students are sometimes less likely to know that they can be an attorney. Um, this is going to sound really stupid, but it never crossed my mind that I could possibly be on the U.S. Supreme Court until Sonia Sotomayor was confirmed. I was 23 years old, like, and I had, gone to college and I was already in law school, and I was like, oh my God, this is a thing that's open to me if I so choose to. I'm never going to be a Supreme Court justice, but the, the the lack of seeing people in these positions that look and sound like you and have similar kind of backgrounds and life stories is really important, and I think that's why the intentionality that the law school is putting into it is kind of like the first step. It goes a long way to show that UST is trying, and I think that's huge.
But I also think it's related to you as mentors. You all play such a hugely important role in showing students what they can do, what the potential is for them to do, and to be, to be lawyers, to be Supreme Court justices, to be judges, partners in law firms. And so, we look to you, our mentors, to provide that role model for them, and goal for them to achieve. Um, the rules of professional responsibility, um, you know, we have this ethical duty to not discriminate. Um, and we all take that very, very seriously, obviously. Um, there's prohibited conduct. We make sure to institute and enforce rules against prohibited conduct to prevent discrimination. Um, we really take that seriously. We take our duty to eliminate bias really seriously because it benefits all of us. We improve our legal profession when we have so many creative ideas from different perspectives, and we improve the legal system for our clients. And like Juliana pointed out, we in the legal profession can serve as wonderful role models for young people, for young students who want to become part of the legal profession.
I think we also have to think about making sure that the students and the new attorneys feel welcome and make sure that they understand they do have a voice, because sometimes they don't know, they don't understand, they don't, like, you can be first generation and see that there are other, people like you in a law firm or public interest or wherever you're at, but sometimes you shy away because you don't hear others speak that are like you. So I feel like we definitely as a society and as a community may have to make sure that everyone feels welcome, everyone feels included, and everybody has a voice.
Thank you, Monica. That's such a hugely important point. Um, you know, I'm going to share some statistics that, like I said, Karen kind of previewed for us, and then there's another statistic that really hits on the point that Monica made. Um, so this is how diverse our profession is. The number of law students, minority law students, actually decreased by 5% since 2009. So it decreased from 36% to 31%. The number of female law students did increase, but it only increased by 2%. There have been no changes in terms of the percentage of lawyers who are white, no changes since 2016. 64% of lawyers are male, 36% are female, no change since 2014, even though the population of our law students increased just by slightly, and even though the population of our law students is 50% women. The percentage of lawyers who are Hispanic or African American, that number of Hispanic attorneys has only increased by 1% over the past 12 years. The number of African American lawyers has not changed at all over the past 10 years. It remains at 5%. So only 10% of lawyers are Hispanic, Latino, or African American, even though 1/3 of our population are made up of people from Hispanic, Latino, or African American background. Um, what is your reaction now to those numbers? So I think it was Juliana who put in the comments that how the increase in diversity in the general public should be matched in the profession. You're exactly right. It should be matched, but boy, it is not being matched. So we are very, very, very slowly becoming more diverse, um, but not as definitely not as quickly as we should, and it's not reflective of the diversity in our general population. And then here's to Monica's point. We have to make sure that we are not becoming diverse just for the sake of numbers and diversity. We have to be careful that women and lawyers of color feel like valued employees, feel like they're valued contributors of the legal profession instead of just tokens of diversity. And I love this quote from Verna Myers. She's Netflix's VP of Inclusion strategy, and she's also a wonderful author. She said, diversity is being invited to the party, whereas inclusion is being asked to dance. So we have to make sure that we're asking our, our colleagues to dance instead of just inviting them to the party and having them be window dressing at that party. So your work and your contribution as a mentor in developing really purposeful relation-based support for students can help eliminate bias and add meaningful diversity to our profession. You as mentors really serve as that connection for students. And so in this part of the CLE, I want to talk about your tips for mentoring across differences. I'll share some tips, but I will look to you to share your tips as well about how you can make those connections with students. Learn about what active steps you have taken or can take to help eliminate bias. To begin with, we recognize that mentoring relationships are diverse in how diverse they are. We work really hard to pair students with all of you based on their interest area, their background, their geographical area, their practice setting preferences, and many other factors. For some students, we even really intentionally pair them with a mentor who has a similar cultural background. Now, we have not been asking for that information in the past because we didn't have the technological capability to do so. But moving forward, particularly in this coming year, we are going to be asking those backgrounds about culture and about whether or not you were a first generation attorney, whether our students are first generation law students. We will specifically ask those questions in the future, in the near future here. So you all share, some similarity to your mentee. And of course, you all share the similarity in that you attended law school, your mentee is attending law school, so you have that connection. Um, but as many of you pointed out, even though you have some commonality, or we work really hard to make sure we pair you with a student who has something in common with you, you sometimes are not able to make that connection. There's mentors and mentees come from different generations. You may not share, the same ethnicity, the same race, the same gender, and other characteristics such as beliefs, values, traditions, or customs. And so sometimes, mentors and mentees have a lot in common, but sometimes they have not very much in common. And then there's that difficulty in making the connection that many of you have pointed out. So, which is better though? Should we work to pair you with your mini me, your clone, or should we pair you with students who are very different from you so that they can learn from your different perspective? We wanted to get your feedback on what your thoughts are about that.
I think having somebody that at least can see themselves in you is pretty valuable. Um, I know for myself, not any mentor through the school, but attorneys that mentored me coming up as a criminal defense lawyer, having ones that kind of came from a similar background. And I grew up pretty poor, not having the usual education that's available to a lot of people. And having people that I could see that they walk that path already, I think is very helpful.
This is Kelly. This might be controversial, but I would say both. I mean, I think it's important to be able to have it modeled for you from someone who you relate to, on multiple levels. But I think it's also important to start to have the exposure of what the profession really looks like when you're practicing. And we've seen the slides that it doesn't necessarily follow that your life in practice is going to be with people that have the same background as you, or look the same as you, or anything like that. So I think it's to be a concerted effort of both. That it's important that you see the examples and the representation of people that you can look to and say that could be me someday. But I also think it's important that you look to other people for it's different than me, but you got to figure out how to make those bridges and connections despite the differences.
Are there certain factors or questions that we should be asking in order to do a better job of pairing mentors and mentees?
I was going to jump in and just respond to the last comment. Sorry, Wing, but I wanted to share. I had a meeting with faculty mentors who are the folks who teach in the upper level program, and I supervise the 2L faculty mentors, and we were having a conversation about our upcoming class, which is communicating across cultures. And one of the faculty mentors said she always encourages her students and her mentees to have a great variety of mentors, that they really should have mentors who are female and mentors who are male and mentors who are um, very much like them and mentors who are very much different from them, just in order to be able to learn from all of them. And so I don't, I guess I don't see the comment as being controversial in any way, because I think um, it is like a tapestry, and being able to benefit from that. That diversity is important. I mean, that's the reason for the diversity, right? Is that everyone brings something different, um, and so we followed that in the mentor program by we try to learn everything we can about the student and everything we can about the mentor, and we try to weave together some things that are similarities, and then honor both of their specific requests. And I like to think we do a good job, but I um, be interested in also hearing the answer to Wing's question.
I do want to point out that, what I've learned from Judy going through the pairing process with her and Monica over the summer is, we will look to see who the students' mentors were in the past. If they've always had female mentors, we'll say, oh, now's a good year for them to have a male mentor. So we not only look at the questions and your answers, and the factors that students have filled in, or your requests, we also look at the student's past mentor as well to, again, like Judy said, give them, similarities, mentors with similarities and commonalities, but also to learn from a mentor who's diverse from them. Any other thoughts or comments, feedback on, what we should ask, or information we should seek as we are pairing you with your mentees? So there's a comment in the chat here that we live in a diverse world. A great observation. The courts should reflect the diverse people we serve. This requires ongoing leadership to show that we get the connections of structural bias here, and that we are doing things differently and not rely on systems that have failed to bring equity to the community and bring the needed change, for sure. Okay. As as Kelly has pointed out, as Judy has pointed out, mentors who share commonalities with their mentors inspire and serve as role models. But diverse mentoring relationships are just as valuable, because mentors can really help expand their mentees' thinking and perspective. On the one hand, mentors can relate to mentees' concerns, common concerns about maybe stereotyping, sexism, or racism, or they can provide a reality check about gender and race issues. But those diverse mentoring relationships can change incorrect assumptions and stereotypes and really lead to a deeper understanding of differences. So both the diverse mentor-mentee relationships, um, those diverse relationships make the mentor and mentee aware of important issues that, students might not have otherwise considered or been exposed to. So I think, like Judy said, what having both, a mentor who's very similar to you and having a mentor who's very diverse from you, both have strengths and both are really important. And it's wonderful that our students have 3 years worth of mentors. So as I mentioned, I've already asked this question, other factors, other important pairing factors that you think we should have information about, or that we should collect from you. I'm going to skip this slide, but please feel free to continue to add any factors that you think might be important for us to learn about, to ask about in the chat. so that we make sure we consider those. Okay. Even though diverse mentor and mentee relationships are successful and beneficial, they often do not happen because there are these perceived barriers or challenges. A survey from the Minority Corporate Counsel Association found that mentors who were of a different gender or race from their mentees often have concerns that what they say or do may be misunderstood, or it might unintentionally offend, or worse, it might lead to possible discrimination or sexual harassment claims. So some mentors are really uncomfortable mentoring minority students or minority attorneys. So it keeps them from hesitating to talk about race or gender issues, because they think that they don't have the right experience or perspective to offer useful advice to their mentee. But interestingly, some minority and women students, um, and interestingly, some minority and women attorneys do not see the value of mentoring another attorney. Um, and then, the mentees have this misperception that they can't talk to mentors who don't share their same gender or race. They can't talk to them about gender or race issues. So there's this, it's almost like a vicious cycle where the mentors, hesitate to talk about these issues, and the mentees think that they cannot talk about these issues with mentors who don't share the same background as they do. They have a misperception that the mentor is not suitable for them because their mentor is different from them. So again, we have this kind of vicious cycle where mentors are uncomfortable mentoring minority women, or minority attorneys or women attorneys, and then minority mentees don't feel like they can talk to their mentors about it if their mentors don't share the same background as they have. What are ways that we can break through these barriers, or these misperceptions and challenges to mentoring that you have tried, or that you have seen, have been successful in using some of these strategies or ways to break through these barriers? Or have you experienced some of these kind of barriers yourself?
I think what's really important is to build those relationships. So both mentee and mentor can feel comfortable just talking about anything like they're friends, and having that, equal and balanced discussion of whatever they need to discuss and want to discuss. I've had incidents where I felt like, ooh, maybe you shouldn't be saying that. But as a friend, because I have a good relationship, I can say, this is the way I think about things. But, I understand that that's not always the way you think about things. But I'm just going to give you my perspective. I don't want you to, if you don't change your mind, that's fine. But this is just from my perspective, one perspective. But I think that's, as a friend, they don't want to hurt my feelings and stuff. So they'll think about it. They're marinated with it for a little bit. And, that's all. That's all I want. That's all I need. I don't need you to change your mind. I don't need you to feel like you did me wrong, because as a friend, I still chose you and you're still my friend. But at least we can have a discussion. And my voice was heard.
That is such a great point, Monica. Thank you. That's exactly what I talk to my students in client interviewing and counseling, the client interviewing and counseling class about, is before your client will listen to you, or your client will trust you enough to share details of their whatever issue they're dealing with, you need to build a relationship of trust with that client. And same thing with mentees. If you as a mentor can build that relationship of trust by either, showing that you have vulnerabilities and talking about your vulnerabilities, and the questions you had as a law student, or as a young attorney, or now as an experienced attorney. But building that relationship of trust will really facilitate getting through those more difficult questions, or the ability to touch on those difficult questions. Such a great point, Monica. Thank you. Anyone else found strategies or different ways of kind of breaking through the barrier of um, being able to talk about these difficult topics and issues with students or mentees? Audrey?
Yeah, thanks so much. This is my second time being a mentor. I really like it. My mentee is just so wonderful. So I've had two different mentees now, and she's just such a delight to work with. And I'm just really happy to know her and to connect with her. She's obviously really bright and interested, which I think is, if she's interested, then it actually doesn't matter how bright she is. So she'll be, she's hardworking, she's interested. So it's really great to be able to talk with her over Zoom, which is what we do. And so what I do is just try and, like, from the very first meeting, just wanted to let her know that the point of the mentorship relationship from my point of view is just being a resource for her throughout her law school career, throughout the bar exam preparation, and throughout searching for a job and beyond if she wants. So just to be able to take advantage of, someone in the community who's already in your corner just automatically. I work as a prosecutor in the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, so obviously we've had a whole lot of different issues come up this summer, and so it was great just being able to talk with her about, her perspective on it and our office's perspective on it. And it was, she's new to me, so it was definitely like a very strong icebreaker, like, nice to meet you. Do you want to talk about George Floyd? So, but I think it's going really well. I think just being able to just let her know that I see my role as just being able to support her and be a resource for her is working out well for us. So, so I'm really grateful for the opportunity. So thanks for doing this mentor relationship. I just think it's great.
Thank you, Audrey. I love that. It makes it so that the mentor-mentee relationship isn't so formal. You've opened yourself up as someone they can just talk to, and just be a resource for everything, not just, we tell students this is not an employment program. The mentor program is a program where you can build this long-term relationship with a mentor, with an attorney or judge who can be your lifelong mentor. And what you convey, Audrey, to your mentee is exactly that. And I think that just allows the mentee to really open up quickly to you and to talk about those difficult issues that they might not have anybody else to talk to about. Thank you for pointing that out.
Well, and if I could respond to that, I think just conveying what your approach to the relationship is, or how you want to be most helpful, I just think is so incredible. And because you have to define, just like you define the relationship you're going to have with your client. Sometimes you have a very cordial, friendly relationship with the client, and sometimes it's more hands off, right? I mean, it's more arm's length, I should say. It's always hands off, but it's more arm's length. and I think this relationship is not really meant to be kind of an arm's length relationship. I mean, it's great to be able to observe, you know, somebody at the top of their game being a mentor. Um, but there's always hope, I think, in all the students' minds that they'll have, that there'll be a personal spark, right? A personal connection, some things that they can connect on, whether it's, you know, baseball or, you know, just a whole range of things. And so to be able to give that to your mentee in terms of how you're viewing the relationship, I think that could be very comforting, because one of the keys to communicating about these difficult topics is to have a comfort, so trust level, but just to have a comfort level, feel like it's a safe relationship, it's friendly enough to have some conversations. um, I mean, I think sharing information about yourself, I mean, not oversharing is a good idea. I think one of the tips that we have in the manual is something like, you know, share your background with your mentor. That's a perfect thing, or with your mentee. That's a perfect thing to do, but don't expect them to share what they're not comfortable sharing. I mean, you learn from them what they want to share with you, and so asking them questions about, you know, so where are you from, which I don't know if Wayne is going to get into that so much, but I mean, there's just some questions that don't put people at ease, especially people from marginalized, you know, who are marginalized or underrepresented. But to be able to share yourself without having an expectation that they're immediately going to be willing to share things with you. And just being open to supporting in any way you can, which is to hear Audrey say that, you know, almost puts tears in my eyes. So thank you so much.
The key to making a diverse mentoring relationship successful, um, like Monica pointed out, I should just have you guys do this presentation between Monica and Kelly and Juliana. You guys really have previewed everything I was going to say here. Um, is to build that relationship. As you get to know each other, those superficial differences kind of give way, and you can see those commonalities, shared values. Maybe, like Judy said, maybe you both like baseball, maybe you both like cooking or running. Those commonalities really come out, and the stereotypes fade away. Um, the differences become less important. And so, hopefully, even with those, you know, those difficult mentoring relationships where there's not quite that connection, um, keep trying. You know, hopefully some personal similarity will come out, will come forward. um, you know, we try really hard to be intentional and about our pairing, and find, you know, that one common factor between you and your mentee, and know that we are reading your bios on your firm website, you know, your LinkedIn profiles, to just really learn as much as we can about you, so that we can find that one common factor between you and your mentee. And like we've already talked about, on the flip side, learn about differences. This applies to both the diverse and non-diverse mentor relationships. Some differences, I hope, you know, will complement each other. That'll strengthen your relationship with your mentee. For example, maybe you are a big picture thinker while your mentee is more detail oriented, and you can point this out to your mentee and show how these characteristics actually really complement each other. One isn't bad or the other, you know, a good characteristic. They actually complement each other. You should ask your mentee how they experience the world. And I think that this was a point that Kelly brought up earlier. We have to remember that our reference points, you know, may be different from what our mentee's reference point is. Um, our mentee's experience, it may not be the same as it is for you. Um, be empathetic when learning about your mentee's experiences, especially their experience of being different. Um, and, you know, to Judy's point about talking or dealing directly with differences and asking about your mentee's background. Studies actually show that mentees who come from a minority background, they do want to talk about diversity issues. They may not want to be asked, where are you from? But they do want to talk about diversity issues. They just don't know how or whether to do it. And they may be looking to you to lead that conversation or to open up that conversation. But they do want to talk about those issues. So ask questions. Maybe not the where are you from question, but ask questions just to learn about your mentee. Another thing that would be really helpful is to decide with your mentee, have that conversation with your mentee about whether they want to explore or talk about diversity issues. Um, if they do, set that as one of your goals. We have that personal and professional development plan requirement for students at the beginning of the year, and that might be the perfect opportunity for you to ask your mentee if they want to talk about diversity issues. And they can set that as a debrief topic, a topic that they will talk to you about, discuss with you about during the year. Or if your mentee and you don't want to talk about it, that's just fine. Just so you both agree that it's okay, that that's not a topic that's of interest to them or is important to them, or something that they don't feel really passionate about. That's okay to not to agree to not talk about it. It's helpful in being direct about differences. It's helpful to admit when we don't understand something about another person's background or experience or worldview. I think, like Monica said, build that relationship of trust, and part of that is sharing our vulnerabilities, that we don't understand, another perspective or a different background. And related to admitting what we don't know, offer information about yourself. And again, that may help your mentee open up. But like Judy said, if they don't, that's okay too. Judy brought this up too. Set expectations with your mentee. Just like with a client relationship, you should also set expectations in your mentor-mentee relationship. Explain how you'd like to help your mentee, and find out from your mentee what they want to learn from you or how you can help them. You can use those expectations to set goals for your mentoring relationship. Again, bringing us back to that personal and professional development plan. That'll really help you have a shared objective and focus that you can work together on. And then you may discover, some values that, it may help you discover how to share some of the values that you have with your work and profession that are important to you and that is important for your mentee to learn about. So those personal and professional development plan are a super great tool for you to set those mentoring goals and set those expectations with your mentee. So what are your thoughts then about using your mentoring relationship to eliminate bias? How, once you set up that great mentor-mentee relationship, how can you use that relationship to eliminate bias? What have you found in your experience mentoring students that helps to eliminate bias? Trying to think if there's a different way to ask that question.
I'll just throw something out there because I think, I mean, all of our students are at some disadvantage, right? I mean, they're going to be brand new in the market, and they need some help. And I think the idea of trying to figure out how you can best help a student is a good frame to start thinking about, especially students who are at a disadvantage. How might you um, how might you mentor them in a way that really helps them move forward, knowing that this isn't a jobs program and you're not expected to give the student a job, although many times you see a student who you really want to work into your organization, and that's a wonderful thing. Um, but the idea of, um, moving from a mentor relationship where you're trying to serve, serve the student, to really helping to try maybe moving it closer to like a sponsee where you're actually trying to move them forward. And I've seen so many examples of mentors who do things like opening up their network for students. So for example, back to the first generation law students, um, they're not going to have a ready-made network of lawyers. And so thinking about when you have a first gen student, to think, okay, talk to them about what their interests are, and make connections and introductions for them. I think that to help them build this diverse network, to help them build, um, you know, learn more and really um, have an advantage when they're in 3 years, when they're in the market, that they know a lot of people, they've been exposed to a lot of different folks. I'd say if you feel like there's a need that your mentee has that you can't meet, but you have somebody in your network who would be good for them, making that connection to move them forward would be might make all the difference.
I think, like Juliana pointed out earlier in our conversation, just the fact that um, you are serving as mentors helps eliminate bias, right? Juliana pointed out that, um, as a young student, a young law student, she didn't, or, just as a young person, she didn't see herself as being able to be a Supreme Court justice, or, there are students, high school students probably, who don't see themselves being able to be a lawyer, just because they don't see someone who looks like them, who is an attorney. So just the fact that you are all serving as mentors, you are help eliminating bias. But here are some other ways that you can help eliminate bias. And I think these, Judy has mentioned some of these, but use your role as a mentor to give your mentee assignments that really challenge them, and then cheer them on when they do well. You really increase their visibility with others, and you call attention to their skills and abilities when you do that. Um, as you work with your mentee, look for or talk about ways that your mentee's different perspective, their style or approach can add value to your law firm, or to a company, or for a client. Again, just cheering your mentee on and pointing out that these differences are really big strengths. Increasing your mentee's visibility with other partners and managers, something that Judy pointed out. Open your network to your mentees. Just wonderful ways that, as a mentor, you can help eliminate bias. Um, Circling back to what Judy talked about earlier, about modeling competence and teaching professionalism, you can model professionalism for your mentee by participating in or taking them to diversity bar association events or events in the community. Now, with COVID, we can't attend these in person, obviously, but boy, if you, invite your mentee to, you know, um, I think Minnepaha just had their bar association event, but just inviting your mentee to attend those with you virtually, you're modeling professionalism for your student, and you're helping to eliminate bias. Um, you can challenge your mentee by providing them with constructive feedback that'll help them develop skills and abilities so they can really shine in their next challenge. So again, that providing them with feedback is helpful to help them improve their skills and abilities so that you can, again, cheer them on and cheer on those improved or gained skills and abilities. And like I said, you are all such wonderful mentors already. You, just by serving as a mentor, you are, helping to diversify our legal profession to help eliminate bias. The fact that you are serving as mentors, you're amazing human beings who model professionalism for your mentee and model the being empathetic and respectful. And the fact that you're attending this CLE shows that you are committed to your own self growth and well-being. You're committed to moving your mentee forward, making time to meet with them, giving them feedback for their development and well-being. Just the fact that you're doing all this, you are all such wonderful mentors who are really helping to diversify our legal profession and eliminate bias in our legal profession. So thank you. Thank you all for serving as mentors, and thank you all for attending and joining us in our CLE. Are there any thoughts or comments that anybody wants to add? We have a couple of minutes left.
Hi, this is Terry again, and I just have a question. I think I've heard Judy reference a manual once or twice. Is that something I missed in an email, or is there somewhere I can locate that? I would just like some a little more guidance on it in terms of, we've just had a couple of questions come up with my mentee, and I mean, we're able to sort through it all, but it would be nice if I had a little more guidance on the, just the various expectations, program, etc.
Monica brilliantly shared the link in the chat. She shared our contact information and then also the link to the mentor manual.
Okay, perfect.
So Monica is, like I said, I should have had you guys present this.
All right, that's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. That manual is searchable. So if your mentee comes with a question, or you have a question, for example, about confidentiality, you can just search for, confidentiality, and it'll take you right to a sample confidentiality agreement, a description of student practice rule 3 that we have students all be certified under to protect confidentiality and attorney-client privilege. And so it's a searchable manual, and it's a great resource to look to, Terry. Thank you for that question.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts?
Well, I've really enjoyed this. Thank you. I need to jump off for a training that starts in 1 minute, but thank you very much for this. This was helpful.
Thank you so much, Terry, and thank you for being a mentor.
Thanks for asking.
Thank you, everybody, for being here and for your contributions to this program, but also to the mentor program. We so appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. It was good to see everyone and see familiar names.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.